Hello and welcome. I'm not a medical professional and I'm not a therapist per se, but I'm speaking from my experience of doing readings over the decades, healings and my own life experience. And this video is about how to stay emotionally regulated when emotions spiral out of control. I know quite a lot about this, and you may find that you become more emotionally dysregulated if you've had a lot of trauma, in particular childhood trauma, or if you're neurodiverse like myself. I'm diagnosed with severe ADHD. If you're diagnosed with CPTSD, and or if you've had a lot of trauma, you may find yourself finding it hard to stay regulated when you're triggered, or if you're tired and triggered, and you may find that your emotions start spiraling out of control. As I said, I know quite a lot about this. And from my own experience, and the experience of other people I've spoken to, they can become more like this, more emotionally dysregulated and more emotional because they want to be heard. Maybe they weren't heard as children or teenagers. Maybe their emotions weren't maybe they weren't made to feel valid, or their emotions valid. And it's almost like, I've been hurt before. I need you to know that. You're hurting me now. I need you to know that. You're triggering me now. I need you to know that. I need you to know how hurt I am. I need you to know how emotionally dysregulated you're making me feel. But the thing is, and sometimes I've been a bit like that, not word for word, or I've become very emotionally dysregulated, and so are other people I've spoken to and done readings for over the years. But the thing is, when we become emotionally dysregulated and highly emotional, pretty much almost 100% of the time, the person we're talking to isn't listening, and they're not listening to the fact, and maybe they don't care about the fact we've been hurt a lot or not listened to, or we've got childhood trauma, or we're ADHD, or we're ASD, or whatever, or we have CPTSD. They're not listening to that. Maybe they don't care. All they're seeing is an emotionally dysregulated person who's probably angry as well. So you find that when you become emotionally dysregulated, almost 100% of the time, certainly 99% of the time, the other person isn't understanding why, they're not listening. And I've had some interactions with people in the past where I've become very emotional, and all they're seeing is a person that's either shouting, maybe tears in the eyes, crying, becoming very emotionally dysregulated. They're not really understanding why, and to be honest, nearly all the time they didn't care. They're just met with this huge amount of emotion. So what can we do? And I'm still working a little bit on this myself, but I'm nearly at the other side of this now, is what can we do when we feel these strong emotions, where we feel we're not being listened to, we're not being understood, or we're being triggered, or somebody has no idea the amount of trauma and abuse we put up with in our lives. Why would they? And would they care if they knew? Well, a professional therapist would, maybe a friend would. A friend probably would. Certain people will, but most people, especially if it's a stranger or an acquaintance, they're not going to listen. They're probably not going to care. And I know that probably sounds very cynical, but it's true. So a lot of the time when we become emotional and emotionally dysregulated, it's falling on deaf ears. And I was always very much, like I've said already, wanting people to understand me. I'd overshare information. I'd want them to understand me. I'd want them to understand my trauma, my pain. I want them to understand why I'm being triggered, but they're not really listening. All they're hearing and seeing is somebody that's highly emotional. So what can we do when we feel like I've said already, when we feel like we're becoming emotionally dysregulated? We can slow down our breathing. We can try and ground ourselves. It can feel like you're about to take off. It's, this emotional dysregulation can feel like you're trying to hold on to an aeroplane. Imagine it like that. Maybe you're trying to hold on to an aeroplane. It's going up into the air and the emotions are going up and up and up, and they're escalating. So you need to sort of imagine pulling that aircraft or hot air balloon or whatever it might be back down to the ground, because it's really good to try and ground yourself when these heightened emotions kick in. The other thing you can do, if it's safe to do so at that moment in time and you're fit enough, you can maybe, if there's time, you can try and do some exercise when those emotions kick in, because exercise increases production of endorphins, happy chemicals, and it will change those neural pathways potentially from feeling aggravated, triggered, emotional, and change the pathway, basically. Change it into exercise, you're going to get an increase of endorphins. If we have conversations when we're anxious, depressed, or angry, to be honest, in my experience, especially angry or anxious, those conversations probably won't go very well, because when we're in those states of emotion, our emotional mind is in control, not our logical conscious mind. So if you're tempted to ring somebody up and explain, or ring somebody up when you're triggered and you're highly emotive, or send an email when you're angry or anxious, or text back when you're feeling really, really emotional and triggered, and whatever words you want to use, I would advise not to. And I believe you me, I've done this many a time. And to be honest, I'll repeat what I've already said. When something is written down or verbalized and it's highly emotional and maybe even angry, which can seem a bit aggressive, the other person won't be listening, and it might even offend them. It might annoy them. It might make them want to not have any interaction with you at all. So the best thing to do is take a step back. And I'm not saying don't respond or don't email or don't text, but take a step back. And the more you take a step back, you're more likely to then write something more diplomatic. And sometimes you might not want to write anything or email or text back or phone back or defend yourself, or feel like you need to defend yourself or feel like you need to explain. You might decide sometimes, that you don't want to. But if you do, the best thing to do is wait for those strong emotions to dissipate, take a step back and think more logically about what you're going to say. So, to reiterate, if you feel your emotions are becoming very big, you're becoming very dysregulated, then it's really good advice to try and take a step back. And I'm taking my own advice. I've spent decades not doing this. Not all the time, but I'll be honest, I've been with my severe ADHD, PTSD, and God knows what else, and things I'm not going to go into here. I've really struggled with emotional regulation. My ADHD is considered severe. I am medicated for that. So I speak from a place of learning the hard way and suffering with all the things that I ever talk about. And I've also spoken to lots of other people over the years and done lots of readings and healings on and off over the years. So I know this happens to other people. Sometimes people say things like, I've got ADHD, and so do I. So I can't be regulated all the time. I'm going to lose emotional control. There's nothing I can do about it. Trust me, I have severe ADHD. It's harder, in my experience, to become emotionally regulated with severe ADHD or even moderate ADHD or CPTSD, of which I'm diagnosed with as well. But it's possible. It's just harder work. It's training that brain, harder work whilst you train the brain, change those neural pathways. Every time we react differently to a situation, we've changed that pathway in the brain. So for instance, what I mean by that is if, for instance, I keep reacting really emotional to everything that triggers me or is offensive, and some things are offensive or they seem offensive, and I'm triggered and I'm emotional because they're not listening to my pain, they're not showing me empathy. If I keep reacting in the same way, like highly emotional, my mind will think that's the way to behave. Yeah, I'll keep doing that. As soon as I start reacting differently, I'm retraining those neural pathways in my brain to behave differently in every situation. And that's what I meant when I said a while ago about trying to get that plane back down on the ground. And I'm speaking metaphorically there. Ground yourself. And like I said, one thing you can do is take a step back, maybe do some exercise. And I just want to reiterate and reaffirm, I suppose, really, that unfortunately, almost 100%, certainly 98 to 99% of people, especially if they're strangers or acquaintances, won't care that much. They won't be listening to why you are the way you are. All they'll be seeing and hearing is somebody that's emotionally dysregulated, which, to be honest, they might find quite annoying, offensive. They won't be interested in it. It won't make them feel anything for you. Yes, you might come across the occasional rarity of a person that might. That can happen. Some people are very empathetic, but most people aren't. So a lot of the time, these big emotions are going to be wasted. And what you'll find later, and this has happened to me quite a lot, then you can feel quite ashamed, embarrassed. And the amount of times in my life I've been like, oh, I wish I hadn't said that. Why did I react like that again? Why did I do it? Why did I do that? I should have taken a step back. So the main takeaways from what I'm saying here, learn to ground yourself, learn to stop that. In terms of metaphorically speaking, try and learn to take that airplane back onto the ground, ground yourself, maybe do some exercise, maybe do some stretching, deep breathing, box breathing. And if you don't know what that is, then research different types of breathing to try and ground yourself. Certainly to take a step back, re-examine your own thoughts and behaviours and think, well, why was I doing that? Why was I so triggered? So that's a bit like CBT, where we're sort of examining why we've acted the way we have, because the thought will come before the action. So being mindful of why, exercise if it's safe to do so and you're able to do that, grounding yourself, taking a step back, and also ultimately realising that unfortunately it'd be nice to live in a world where everybody cared about everybody deeply and everybody was hugely empathetic, but unfortunately that's not always the case, and very often it's not the case. And it's really, really accepting that reality as well. And also accepting the fact that on a positive note, you can also seek professional therapy if you're really, really struggling with this. But I thought this, and I'm not a professional therapist, I'm not a medical professional, but I thought this video might be quite helpful. Until next time.